The Tower of Babel is a famous story from the Bible, found in Genesis 11 verse 1 to 9. It is one of the best-known accounts in the Hebrew Bible and has influenced religion, literature, art, and language for centuries. The biblical story. According to Genesis, after the flood, all humanity spoke one common language and migrated to the land of Shinar, generally identified with southern Mesopotamia. There they decided to build a city, a tower, with its top in the heavens. Their stated goal was to make a name for themselves and avoid being scattered across the earth. God saw the project and said that because the people were united by one language, nothing they planned would be impossible for them. To stop the project, God confused their language so they could no longer understand one another. Unable to cooperate, the people scattered across the earth and construction stopped. The place was called Babel because there God confused the language of the whole world. What does the story mean? Different traditions interpret the story in different ways. Human pride. Many Jewish and Christian interpreters see it as a warning against arrogance, people trying to elevate themselves to God's level. Earlier in Genesis, humanity was instructed to spread throughout the earth. Instead, the builders sought to remain together in one place. The Tower of Babel, Genesis 11, 1 to 9. After the great flood, the Bible says that all the people on earth spoke one language and understood one another perfectly. As they traveled east, they settled in a region called Shinar, which most historians identify with ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. The people said to one another, open quote, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly." Close quote. Instead of building with stone, they made baked bricks and used bitumen, a natural asphalt, as mortar. They then decided to build a city and a great tower that would reach into the heavens. They explained why they wanted to build it. Open quote, "Let us make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." Close quote. According to the Bible, God looked down at what they were building and said that because everyone spoke one language and worked together, they would be able to accomplish whatever they set their minds to. God then decided to confuse their language so they could no longer understand one another. Once they could no longer communicate, the work stopped. The people separated into different groups and spread throughout the earth. The unfinished city was called Babel, because that was where God confused the language of humanity. Why was God opposed to the tower? There are several interpretations. Human pride. The builders wanted to make themselves famous and exalt themselves. Disobedience. Earlier in Genesis, God had commanded humanity to spread throughout the earth. Instead, they chose to remain together in one place. Overconfidence. Some believe the story warns against humanity becoming so united in its own power that it forgets its dependence on God. Was the tower really meant to reach heaven? Most biblical scholars think the phrase "reach to the heavens" is a figure of speech describing an extremely tall structure. It was probably inspired by the massive ziggurats of ancient Babylon, stepped temple towers that symbolized a connection between heaven and earth. Is the story historical? Views differ depending on one's beliefs. Many Jews and Christians believe it records a real event, though they may differ on whether every detail is literal. Most historians and archaeologists believe it is a theological story rather than a historical explanation for the origin of the world's languages. Human languages are understood to have developed gradually over thousands of years. The Tower of Babel remains one of the Bible's most memorable stories because it addresses themes of unity, ambition, pride, language, and the diversity of human cultures. It is found in Genesis 11:1-9. Many readers, both religious and non-religious, have asked the same questions. The phrase, "a tower with its top in the heavens," Genesis 11:4, does not necessarily mean the builders literally thought they could reach God's dwelling place. In the ancient Near East, saying something reached to the heavens was a common expression for something extraordinarily tall. For example, the Bible also describes the walls of certain cities as reaching to heaven, which is understood as a figure of speech, not a literal claim. The Tower of Babel story has often been understood as an ideological story. That is, a story written to explain why something exists. In this case, it explains why people speak different languages, why humanity is spread across different nations, why Babel came to symbolize human pride. From a modern scientific perspective, linguists explain the diversity of languages through gradual change over thousands of years as human populations migrated and became isolated. Archaeologists and historians likewise explain the spread of people through migration, climate change, trade, and the rise and fall of civilizations, not through a single event in which everyone's language suddenly changed. Within religious traditions, however, many believers understand the story differently. Some read it literally, while others see it as a theological lesson about pride, human ambition, and the importance of humility before God, rather than as a scientific account of the origin of languages. So there are at least three major ways the story is viewed. Literal. It records an actual historical event in which God confused human languages. Symbolic or theological. It teaches spiritual truths about human pride and unity without intending to describe history in a modern sense. Literary or mythic, it is an ancient origin story explaining the diversity of languages and nations. The story reads like an explanation for why different languages and peoples exist, is one that many biblical scholars, especially those who study Genesis as ancient literature, have also discussed. It is a well-established interpretation of the text. The story of the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11 verse 1 to 9, is anonymous. The Bible itself does not identify who wrote it. Traditionally, both Jewish and Christian tradition attributed the first 5 books of the Bible, including Genesis, to Moses. However, most modern biblical scholars do not think Moses wrote Genesis in its present form. Instead, many scholars believe Genesis was compiled from multiple older traditions that were passed down orally and in writing over many centuries. These traditions were edited together by later scribes. One influential scholarly model, known as the documentary hypothesis, suggests that Genesis contains material from different sources, though scholars today debate the details of that model.